or two, so if you could start making your way back to your seats, that would be great. Okay, so we'll go ahead and get started again. So if I can have our panelists come on back up and have a seat. Okay, we'll go ahead and get started again now. I'd like to make a quick announcement that Jeanette is here providing Spanish interpretation services. And so for anybody in the audience, if you do require Spanish interpretation, please feel free to come on up and have a seat next to Jeanette, and she can help with that. And also a call out to those of you on the web that if you need Spanish interpretation or translation services, you please go ahead and type your comment in there, and we have it taken care of. We'll be able to have that translated here. And we'll also, again, I'm sorry, Jeanette.
Solo está diciendo para cualquier persona que está ahí en la audiencia que necesite interpretación, cuando llega al punto de dar su comentario, por favor, se puede pasar aquí y yo puedo ayudarle con eso.
Thank you, Jeanette. And also a call out to those of you on the web that we will be taking phone calls during this topic. So if you had something that you wanted to say during topic 1 and you didn't get a chance to, certainly please dial in. We'll check in with you in just a few moments.
Igualmente para la gente que está llamando por teléfono, si tenía cualquier cosa que quería decir en español, se puede para el asunto 1 o 2.
Thank you.
Gracias.
Okay, so let's get started again back with topic 2. So we had a very good discussion with topic 1. You really have shared so much with us with as Rachel said, the primary symptom being the fear and anxiety, but also some of the other symptoms that you mentioned that you're living with, and we thank you for that. And also thank you to the healthcare providers in the audience for sharing your perspectives also. So now what we'd like to do is start with topic 2, which is, again, a much deeper dive into patient perspectives on your treatment approaches for treating Chagas disease. So once again, here what we're listening for is, again, what are you currently doing to treat your condition? So remind us again of your treatment regimen, and if that regimen has at all, changed for you at all, what do you feel that are the biggest downsides for your treatment regimen? How do you experience them? And what things are you looking for in an ideal treatment for Chagas? We also encourage you to tell us what worries you the most about this particular treatment that you're taking. Is there anything that worries you for the future with the treatment that you are on? Okay, so with that, once again, I'd like to turn it over to Candace for your comments.
All right. What am I currently doing? Nothing right now. I did have to ask my physician, just my family physician, it's been 2 weeks ago, I guess now, to have an echo done and to have some blood work done because he doesn't know what to do. As a matter of fact, I had to get something to make me happy just to get on the airplane. So when I went to see him, he told me to be sure and bring back as much information as I can to provide to him. And if I have Chagas, I know that there's more than just myself in my little small town. Because, as I said before, I did find the bug there, and it was tested, and it is positive. There's going to be a lot more cases. Therefore, we're going to need the medication very, very soon. But I currently do not experience any symptoms as he does, unfortunately. Now, when I was taking my medication, I was having to travel an hour and a half every 2 weeks to go and get my medication because CDC would not allow him to give me 60 days worth of medication. I had to go every Wednesday, have blood work done. On Thursday, once they seen that it was good, on Friday I would run down another hour and a half to College Station and get my medication for 2 more weeks. Although I did well on my medication. The ideal treatment, I wish there was an ideal treatment. Right now, all you have is 2 medications that I know of that are in another country. So ideally, the treatment would be that it is local, and you don't have to go through CDC to get it. I guess that's it.
And Candace, is there something that worries you about the future with the medication that you've taken? Do you foresee your treatment regimen having to take any other medications, and how does that worry you?
I have not taken any other medications at this time because we don't know what to look for, first of all. Well, I'm going to run back home, and I'm going to tell the doctor now, thanks to my neighbor here, I'm so glad that we have met, that I should be seeing a physician at least once a year just to watch for something. My mother had heart problems, and she passed away just 8-9 months ago. But I did have her tested, and she does not have Chagas. She didn't pass away from that. I had my dog, which is at my cost. I took my dog down and had her tested, and she passed. And I also had my son and 4-year-old granddaughter tested because they live with me, and they also do not have it. But should I get them tested again next year? I don't know. I can tell you this. I've had several people tell me, well, now these are the very few people that know that I have Chagas. Well, I think I'm going to go and give blood just so I can find out if I have Chagas. You know, that's not good because in Texas, not all of that blood is being tested. And if my neighbor over here has it and they happen to be maybe 30% that is not tested, and then they give it to your husband, wife, or child, we do need to start screening. It's something that needs to be screened. I really feel that way because you're going to have a lot of people that's going to just run out and start donating blood. And we need to get the medication here.
Thank you, Candace. Myra?
Hello again. For my treatments, like I said before, I've been really lucky. I've never had any physical symptoms. In the last 2 years, actually, let me go back. 3 years ago, we started doing, Dr. Mandy started doing a heart MRI. First one was perfect. And the second one, 2 years ago, I got that bad phone call that I can have a heart attack at any given moment. Also last year, I was told by it was communicated to my doctor, my first treatment has been considered a fail by the CDC. So the CDC said, and this is with the Nifurtimox. So the CDC said I need a second treatment with the benznidazole. I'm all for it. I've been blessed not to have the physical symptoms of it. I do, on the other hand, have everything that you can't see, which worries me more because those are usually the bad ones. It's been a year and a half that I've been waiting for benznidazole because according to the CDC, we have a shortage on that medication, which I found out in November at the conference that we did in New Orleans. So I went online actually and I looked up to see what it will cost me to buy myself benznidazole. It's $225 per jar of benznidazole, and I need about 3 or 4 of those. Or my husband said we live in California, we could just go to TJ. We could just try to get it there. So it's frustrating because I don't have any physical symptoms, which I find myself fortunate that I can tell you about. I'm worried about everything I can't see. I think by the time we get to a symptom, it's probably too late. Something's already happened that I had to go see a doctor for. And by then, you have to treat either A, what's already wrong, or keep taking medication to solve that problem. To me, the ideal treatment will be something that's not so toxic. The medications have been here for so long, but no one's taking anything to try to bring out new medications. I read the side effects of the benznidazole, but they're not any different than the Nifurtimox, which I did the treatment in 2008. They're just overall, they kill the bad, but they also kill the good. So unfortunately, that's the only options we have. We don't have any other options. One of the reasons why I also got involved is I was really, really lucky that my kids were negative. But if my kids were positive, at that time, I will have to give them their adult dose, hope not to overdose them with the way the medication was cut. I believe now we do have a pediatric medication. And if we treat the young ones first, then I don't think we'll get to this level. So I'm really hoping that overall we start with the little ones, with the medication, just overall hopefully better medication.
Thank you, Myra. And Myra, you just mentioned that you experienced some side effects with the medicine that you took. You said it took care of the bad, but then it also hurt the good. So what were some of the side effects you experienced?
Like I said, I've been really lucky. I had one side effect. I lost about 25 pounds in 2 months. But I was really happy that I lost 25 pounds. But then I gained them right back.
And Myra, sorry, one more question for you. You mentioned in your statements that you put together that you're now undergoing additional procedures because they found some tracts in your heart. So can you share with the audience some of the procedures that you're going through now?
Sure. Well, with the addition of adding my heart MRI on an annual basis now, which is a constant battle with my insurance, because my primary physician does not understand, or, well, why is it that you need that? Because he doesn't know where to send me to. So I have to go to Dr. Mandy, then they have to request it. My insurance is, why do you need that? It's not your primary physician who's requesting it. And in finding the tracks with the heart MRIs, I had to do, help me, Dr. Mandy, the procedure that I did to see if I needed there we go. Electrophysi, an EPS, which I had my first one done 2013, and I just had another heart MRI, so we're waiting on that, and we'll see how that goes. I also listened to her and went to see the gastroenterologist, I believe, and I get back late tomorrow. I am due at the doctor's office at 10 o'clock on Thursday for stomach x-rays to start with that. Okay. So, but if I don't do it myself, no one's there to push me.
Thank you, Myra. Rachel, did you have any comments? Or we can go to Carlos? Okay. Carlos?
Bueno, quiero decirles que me fue, tengo aparatos, tengo 3 años.
I wanted to tell you that I've had this apparatus for 3 years.
Tengo que estar en un tratamiento de medicina.
And I have to be under treatment with medication.
Cada 15 días tengo que me están chequeando la sangre.
Every 2 weeks they're checking my blood work.
Voy al hospital a que me saquen sangre.
So I go to the hospital so that they can draw blood.
Para ver si la sangre no se ha espesado.
So to see if there are any changes in the blood.
Porque estoy tomando medicamentos, medicina para la sangre para que no se espese.
So I'm taking blood thinners and other types of medications.
Entonces por eso tengo que estar yendo cada 15 días.
So I have to go and be followed every 2 weeks.
Y con el doctor cada mes.
And I have to see one doctor every month.
Entonces, quiero decirles que con eso me he sentido bien. El tratamiento.
And so I wanted to let you know that I felt okay. I felt good with this treatment that they're doing.
Pero tiene que estar pendiente uno día tras día tomándose la medicina para que la sangre no se espese.
But you have to make sure that you're always taking your medication so that your blood is not getting too thick.
Porque si no se toma uno la medicina, por las noches tiene sangramiento por las encías.
And you have to take the medication because if you don't at nighttime, you might have some bleeding.
Entonces por eso tiene que estar uno pendiente del medicamento.
So you have to be on top of your medication.
Gracias.
Thank you.
Yes, Rachel, did you have some comments?
Well, I think it's more interesting to hear directly from the patients, but as I can speak for the providers, and I hope that Sheba will chime in, or all of the people who come from South America, where treatment of Chagas is really something that they know very much about. There are some nice studies that show that about 85% of adults who begin a treatment regimen with benznidazole will be able to finish therapy, but that means that 15% of them won't. That's, to me, an unacceptably high number of people who are not able to tolerate it. The side effects that seem to be pretty common are headache, weight loss, and rash. And the rash is the scariest one because in a very small number of people, it can progress to a very life-threatening complication called Stevens-Johnson syndrome, which, if the patient doesn't die, it's often because they received treatment in an intensive care unit. The risk is very low, and it can be caught in time if there's very, very frequent patient follow-up. But that can be burdensome on the patients, as you've already discussed, but is one reason perhaps why your doctor chose to have you come see them every 2 weeks to get the medicine, because it meant that they were able to see you frequently. So it's very cumbersome, it's very burdensome. It's 60 days of therapy for benznidazole, it's 90 days of therapy for nifurtimox, which has other side effects that can include psychosis, and Sheba can speak to this more than I can, but there are a lot of problems with the medications. That being said, they are all that we have at present. And then for the more advanced cases of heart failure, like Mr. Tobar has, there are all of the standard medications that we use for the treatment of heart failure. And then if someone's fortunate enough to have insurance or to be able to pay for the advanced therapies that he has, those advanced therapies, which are very costly and time-intensive in terms of the way that they're managed. Ultimately, heart transplant patients are required to take immunosuppression for lifelong. They need to be monitored with biopsies. They can have the risk of rejection. They can have the risk of reactivation of their Chagas disease. It can be a very, very problematic medical condition. So,
Thank you, Rachel. And a quick follow-up question for Carlos. Carlos, could you share your thoughts on what would be an ideal treatment for you, given, what you just described?
¿Puede decir cuál va a ser un tratamiento ideal basado en lo que usted ya había compartido con nosotros?
El tratamiento ideal es que
The ideal treatment is that
tenemos que estar pendientes. Quizás yo no le podré dar quizá alguna explicación adecuada, como ustedes piensen.
maybe I won't be able to give the
Pero-
explanation that you're looking for, but
Tenemos que estar pendientes
we always have to be attentive to
de las personas. Quizás, como les decía, que en mi país
the
no,
person.
no detectan todas estas enfermedades.
Like in my
Y
country
por
where
eso
they
uno
didn't detect it.
llega a las o sea, que llega a gravedad aquello. Entonces, si pudiéramos evitar
So basically what I'm saying
con tiempo.
is that it's not being diagnosed in time. Like I said, in my country, we only get a diagnosis when we've already arrived to a place where we have a serious condition. If we could diagnose it earlier, that would be the ideal treatment, and start treating it earlier.
Sí, porque no es fácil la vida así, con vivir con estos aparatos, no es fácil.
Because life is not easy living with the apparatus that I have to use now.
Quizás ustedes me mirarán bien como bien alegre aquí, pero la situación no es fácil.
You're looking at me, you say I look good.
No es fácil.
You think I'm in a happy situation, but it's a very difficult situation that I'm living with.
Pues esto tiene muchos cambios.
There have been a lot of changes in my life.
Por momentos usted puede sentir que todo como alegría. Luego hay cambio.
So first your life is happy, and you're happy the treatment's working, but everything changes.
Sí, porque le agarra depresión, dolor de cuerpo, siente que mareos, todo eso. Eso, si usted no está pendiente con la medicina, le va a agarrar.
So you have all these symptoms like dizziness, you have headaches, you have body aches, and if you miss any of medication, then you have other symptoms that are brought on by missing your medication.
Así que es importante decirle a la comunidad, a los lugares, ir a los lugares a decirles que se hagan el examen.
So it's important to tell communities that they need to have an evaluation for this.
Para no llegar hasta consecuencias como yo estoy.
So that they don't end up having the type of consequences that I am living through now.
Solamente.
And that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you. Thank you, Carlos. I understand we have somebody joining us on the phone.
Maria, are you there?
Hi, Maria. Thank you for joining.
Gracias por haber entrado en nuestra reunión, María.
Maria, would you like to share your thoughts and experiences and tell us about your treatment regimen?
¿Usted quiere compartir su experiencia y hablarnos del el régimen de tratamiento que usted está recibiendo? Okay.
Algo muy especial para mí poder compartir la amarga experiencia que yo viví a través del problema del Chagas.
It's very important to me to have this opportunity to be able to explain to you the things that are going on because of this Chagas disease. Chagas disease. Siga, María.
Así, bueno, voy a comentar lo que yo viví a través de este problema. Tenía como tal vez unos 8 o 12 años por ahí, cuando en mi casa mis padres pues se separaron, se fueron uno para El Salvador, otro para Honduras, y vivíamos en una casa de esas que tienen como palmas.
Okay, just un momento. So I just wanted to explain how this all began. When I was about 12 years old, my family had moved from the place that we were in Honduras, and we went to a house that had roofing that was sort of made from a palming and earthen materials. ¿Siga?
De esa edad picada por esos animalitos, nunca pensé que me fuera a hacer tanto daño.
And we saw that there were some insects there, but we didn't imagine that just this little insect could cause such problems and damage. ¿Siga?
Bueno, cuando yo llegué a este país, yo vine sana, pensé, empecé a trabajar y yo empecé con unos síntomas de una tos reseca.
And so espera un momento. When I got to this country, I did have some symptoms, but it just was a cough, and it just seemed like an ordinary type of infection. ¿Siga?
Y luego los médicos, pues, costó que me detectaran mi mal. Decían que era el polen, que era alergia, el frío, lo caliente, eso.
And espera un momento. Espere. And the doctor said that it was probably just from a change of climate. I was just experiencing some cold symptoms, things of that nature. ¿Siga?
Luego, cuando yo empecé a sentir más fuerte los síntomas, empecé a sentir un cansancio cuando tosía y la tos era más frecuente. Se me quitaba por 15 días, a los 15 días volvía.
So my cough became more severe. I started feeling very fatigued and tired as additional symptoms. ¿Siga?
Era bien frecuente ya. Cuando yo fui a la doctora, vino ella y yo le dije que yo recién había ido, tenía una semana de haber ido de ella y ya había vuelto otra vez aquí el malestar a mí, a mi garganta y mi cuerpo. Era un escalofrío, era como mareo que me daba. Los síntomas son bien.
Espere. So I went back to my doctor, and because I wasn't getting any better, I was having more frequent visits to the doctor. I was having dizziness. I was having pains, body pains. I was having chills. ¿Siga?
Y entonces vino ella y me dijo, nunca te han detectado nada, no sé qué tengo. Me mandó a hacer una radiografía, esto hace como aproximadamente 5 años atrás. Fui a hacerme la radiografía y cuando ella detectó era que yo tenía un fluido en mi corazón.
So they sent me to do some x-rays. They said that they thought that I had some fluid around the heart, and this was something that they detected after years of these minor symptoms. ¿Siga?
Entonces me dijo, tú estás muy mal, tienes que irte inmediatamente al hospital. Bueno, yo agarré y me fui al hospital inmediatamente y cuando yo llego al hospital el doctor me dice que sí estoy bien mal, pero todavía ellos no saben qué es lo que yo tengo. Ellos saben que
Okay, espera. So they told me that my condition was very serious and that I had to go to the hospital immediately, and that's what I did. I went to the hospital and they examined me there also, and they said yes, my condition was very severe, and they could see that it was severe, but they didn't know what I had. They didn't give me the overall diagnosis of the condition. ¿Siga, señora?
Bueno, entonces empezaron a empezar con muchos exámenes, el hospital de Washington, D.C., el George Mason, ahí donde encontré un doctor que se llama Dr. Sagan.
The doctor is stable? So I went to, they did a lot of evaluations at the hospital. It was George Mason in Washington under, I believe she said, Dr. Sable. ¿Siga?
Y entonces me mandó a hacer varios exámenes porque no salía nada. Costó para detectar la enfermedad.
It took them a while to diagnose the infirmity because the disease, they kept doing a lot of tests that were all coming up negative. ¿Siga?
Y cuando ella tiene sus resultados, él me dice que yo tengo el mal de Chagas. Me dio una medicina de Brasil, pero esa medicina no llegó para nada.
Perdóname, ¿me puede repetir la última parte?
Ellos me dieron una medicina
De Brazil. So they gave me a medication actually that came from Brazil.
pero eso no llegaba para nada.
They said that's what I needed, but it took a long time and it never arrived.
Luego, cada año iba peor. Mi cansancio era más grande. Era
So-
como que se me cerraba la respiración y ya daba caso que ya caminaba más despacio.
And espera, while all this was going on, my condition was getting worse and worse. I was having difficulty breathing. I was having difficulty walking. I had to walk slower and slower. ¿Siga?
Jeanette, may I ask you to ask Maria what is she taking now, and is she experiencing downsides or side effects because of what she's taking now?
Y la pregunta aquí es, ¿cuáles son los medicamentos que usted está tomando ahorita y si hay cualquier reacción adversa a los medicamentos que está tomando?
Estoy tomando varios medicamentos, muchos medicamentos.
I'm taking a lot of medication. ¿Cuáles?
Todo el corazón, mucho marcapasos, luego me pusieron una bolita en el brazo.
I have a pacemaker, so I'm taking medications that are related to the pacemaker. ¿Y qué más?
Ya pasamos ahorita estoy buscando la lista de las medicinas.
There's a long list of medications.
Okay. And what would she look for for an ideal treatment? Can you ask her perspectives on that?
Y si tuviera la oportunidad de tener su medicamento, su tratamiento ideal, ¿Qué quería esperar en cuanto a eso, un tratamiento ideal?
¿Cómo así?
What do you mean exactly?
Sorry?
What do you mean?
So if what sort of, with the downsides that she's experiencing now, what would she look for in a treatment that would maybe not have certain downsides or something that could be easier for her to take?
Si los medicamentos que usted está tomando ahorita tienen reacciones adversas, ¿cuáles son otras cosas que si existía que usted podía tomar en su tratamiento ideal que no iba a darle estas reacciones adversas?
El único tratamiento, el única medicina que esa sí me ha hecho algo de daño en el estómago es una que se llama Cirolim. Esa es la que me la han cambiado.
Sirolimus is the only one that gave me any problems or adverse reactions, and so they changed that medication.
Okay.
Porque el problema del Chagas como que es que espesa la sangre. Porque esta medicina es para que me ranee más la sangre. Porque en el examen salió
Perdóname, ¿qué hace qué cosa al sangre? This medication is to do something to the blood, and I'm not exactly hearing what it is that it does to the blood.
Okay.
Y están preguntando si usted ya había tenido transplantación del corazón y están diciendo que sí, ¿verdad?
Okay.
Yes. Yes, in 2014.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Maria, and we encourage her to stay on the line if she can so she can participate in the discussion.
Gracias, María, para sus comentarios y si usted puede quedar en la línea para escuchar y participar más en la discusión al hablar que tenemos.
Okay. So once again, thank you to our panelists, and thank you, Maria, joining us on the phone, and thank you, Jeanette, for the interpretation. So again, let's give our panelists a round of applause, and also to Maria joining us on the phone. Okay, so let me look to my FDA panel quickly. Yes, Jonathan?
Now, I'd just like to address a comment that was made about blood donor testing in the United States. And in point of fact, blood donors are tested for Chagas as part of the donation process, and it's a universal test that's applied to donors, and I think it's been in place for about 8 years. So every unit of blood that is transfused in this country that's collected the donor is tested. Not each unit necessarily, but the donor is tested. Just for clarification.
Okay, thank you, Jonathan.
But I don't understand what you mean by that. The donor is tested, not the blood. Because I'm told.
Right, they get a blood specimen from the donor, and it's tested in the laboratory for the antibodies that would indicate that you had Chagas exposure in the past and had active infection. But that's a one-time application to a donor. It's done at the first donation. So it's, quote, donor testing rather than each individual unit. If they went back a second time to donate, they wouldn't have that Chagas test again because they had a negative test and they were living in the United States.
Thank you, Jonathan. Teresa, did you have a comment?
So I guess just to understand what Jonathan just said, just to make sure I understood what you just said, that is there already a rule in place? All donors are screened, all blood banks are screening for Chagas, and if they find that initial test that they do comes back with and how reliable? I guess the test is very reliable in terms of true positive. Okay, then there's a rule in place now that those donors would be taken, they would not donate. And so that the blood supply, I guess what you're suggesting is that the blood supply would be probably not exposed to potential blood from Chagas positive.
Yeah, right. The blood supply would be protected from people donating who were carrying Chagas organisms. And just to go on about this a little, so they would be on a permanent deferral list. But what's happened now is because testing has gotten more sophisticated, the screening test actually has to undergo a supplemental test. And that will help determine if the person has a false positive, test is not perfect, but if they actually have Chagas infection. So that's been done as part of the testing mechanism now, to make sure that these people are not part of the blood supply.
Thank you, Jonathan. And we have two comments here, so we'll start with Dr. Maimandi.
Most organ transplant programs also are doing Chagas screenings.
Thank you, Dr. Maimandi. And one other comment? No? Okay. Thank you. Yes, Teresa?
And so that's a separate consideration from the other question we had, which is about the required reporting, which sounds like that's more recent to require blood. The AABB is now reporting when they find those people with the initial.
The AABB doesn't report to any organization. They just have published their data recently about it.
Okay,
yeah.
that's good.
That's my understanding.
Thank you. Yes. Dr. Maimandi, could we pass the microphone? Yeah, I think it's, just give it a minute. Yep. No.
Barbara might want to correct me, but the last that I remember, it wasn't 100% of the blood system that was being screened. I think the FDA guidance is voluntary.
It's universal screening of donors, universal.
Has it changed since I left CDC?
Well, I'm speaking for them because they're not here.
Barbara, did you want to comment on this?
Well, I think part of the confusion is how to explain this issue of testing a donor once, and also what Karen was referring to was earlier on, there were slightly different policies. And then also in terms of the reportability issue, there's some distinctions that might be complex to explain. Actually, it is a reportable disease in a few states, but in terms of national notifiability, it's not a nationally notifiable condition, but relatively few conditions are. But we at CDC have various mechanisms which are far from perfect in terms of tracking, but that's people who come to our attention through physicians such as Dr. Imande and Dr. Marcus and patients who are tested at CDC or get the medication through CDC.
Thank you, Barbara. Yes. Joseph.
Just changing back to topic number 2. I have a question about maybe some understanding about the early chronic disease and treatment for early chronic disease. And what is it that you monitor for treatment? And Dr. Marcus, to start with you, what do you monitor for treatment? And then to hear from the perspective from Myra and Candace, what is it ideally that you would expect to experience as a result of the treatment?
Well, I think you've asked a really great question, and unfortunately, I can tell you what the clinical experience is now, but it's far from perfect. The science, and there are people in this room who know it far better than I do, would suggest that if you treat an adult with indeterminate phase disease, so they don't yet have any markers of damage, cardiac damage on their EKG, with benzonidazole, that there will be seroconversion, reversion of serology to normal in a fairly small percentage of patients. What isn't 100% clear yet in the literature is what that means for their likelihood of developing long-term cardiac complications down the line. So as a cardiologist, that's really what I'm looking for, and I think serial electrocardiograms are appropriate, and on a yearly basis or every 2 years to see whether or not there's been any advancement of disease. It sounds like Sheba has more assessments that she's doing in her program. But we have very limited resources here, and an EKG is a very simple, non-invasive test without any radiation. So,
thank you, Rachel.
What we do is pretty elaborate.
We do baseline electrocardiograms. We have baseline titers. We get one chest x-ray at the onset. Baseline labs. We treat. We see patients every 2 weeks for follow-up of their labs. At the end of treatment, we get another titer. And then annually, we do titers to see when the seroconversion, usually if it happens, it will happen, 8 years, 10 years down that late in the process. We get echocardiograms every year. If the echo shows any abnormality, we proceed and get a cardiac MRI. And the reason why we do cardiac MRIs is that cardiac MRIs are incredibly good at showing scar formation. So when a tissue dies, when the parasite kills off myocytes, you get a scar on the MRI. What we then do, because I think I can predict who is going to have cardiac death. Those scars are what triggers the arrhythmias that cause cardiac death. So if there is scar, we do an EP study. And if we can elicit an arrhythmia, they get a defibrillator. Now this is in the population whose LV function is still okay. For those that are, they've already lost half their function, 2/3 of their heart function, we put in a defibrillator and we kind of watch them, and the majority of people that we put defibrillators in unfortunately use their defibrillators appropriately often because they have multiple episodes of sudden death. And that's when we get into adding medications and then doing the ablations.
Thank you, Dr. Maimandi. Yes.
I think we're going to discuss a little bit of this later on in the day. I think there is going to be a talk from Karen Byrne, also a little bit on natural history. I'm going to summarize some of the scientific, some of more recent data from clinical trials. But I think it's worth noting an element. I just wanted to make 2 points. One is in relation to definitions, right? And actually, when one talks about early chronic and how that's actually understood, because actually I'm sitting on the table here with Dr. Sosistani that did a trial on early chronic, and here we're talking here, and Dr. Alce that is a pediatrician. We have focused quite a bit of the discussion up to the moment in terms of adults, which are likely to represent, for example, in the United States, the highest burden of the disease, as we understand, though we don't know actually what proportion and how many children are actually involved. But I think it's important at least to remember this as part of this session, the importance of the disease in kids. And I will quote again Dr. Alce because he didn't talk, but the fact that often an adult is a child that was not treated, and not treating kids is malpractice. And so I'm again quoting. But I think the issue here is when you talk about early chronic, if one is not referring to kids and to children, and that in that case, actually the response to treatment, there is quite a bit of discussion in terms of a shift that for centers where one can actually do PCR, the PCR is today in a number of centers actually what they are using to assess treatment response. And besides the fact that, so it's just a note, not to let this not be mentioned beyond the serological response, etc. But the other is there were a number of questions in terms of what would be an ideal treatment, and I just wanted to share the drugs. I work for Drugs for Neglected Diseases Initiative, and as part of our as we started the discussions in the Chagas disease program, we actually devised like a target product profile in which we involved experts, also patient representatives. We have a Chagas disease clinical research platform where we actually share this information. And from the beginning, the ideal treatment was one that would be at least non-inferior to the current available treatments in terms of safety and tolerability, and non-inferior in terms of efficacy, but definitely better in terms of the safety and tolerability. And that one could and ideally should have shorter treatment courses if we can, and one should have an oral treatment, ideally administered once a day. But anyway, this is actually an exercise that have gone through, but it's just wanted to share.
Thank you, Riviera. And would you mind just please introducing yourself again?
Sorry? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm Isabella Ribeiro from the NDI.
Thank you very much. Let me look to my FDA panel. Any follow-up questions? Okay. Yes. Let's have a comment here.
Hello, my name is Jaime Alche from Buenos Aires Children's Hospital. I am a pediatrician. I would like to reinforce that we have to think that Chagas disease is an infectious disease. It's not a cardiac disease. We are talking about sequela. We have to talk more about infectious disease and less about cardiac disease. When I heard about transplantation as treatment, this is a failure of the health systems. Yes? That's all.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And to the healthcare providers and other physicians that are seeing patients, can you tell us anything else that you may have heard from your patient group on what they might be? I know, Dr. Rivera, you just mentioned some ideal treatments, that what's most important to patients for ideal treatments. But would other healthcare providers like to provide some of the downsides that you're seeing with the treatments that your patients are taking?
These drugs are potent drugs. If you're not feeling it, you're probably not taking it. Nifurtimox has its own set of side effects. Some people can't tolerate it at all. We used to use nifurtimox as our first line here. We're now using benznidazole. But regardless of which you use, you need to have the other, because there's a population that won't tolerate that one medication. So I want to say that first. We have two options. We should have both options on the table for our use here. And again, we can adjust the dose up and down to get them through a treatment usually. But again, there's that population that has a horrific reaction to it that we just can't use it. So we need both drugs. Our prevalence, we've tested over 6,000. We've screened over 6,000 people in Los Angeles. Our prevalence consistently has been around 1.5%. So you take our Latin American immigrant population in the U.S., 1 to 2% of those patients will have Chagas. That's pretty incredible. The fact that we're dealing on it, you have 2 cardiologists as the main physicians in the U.S. advocating, treating, screening for Chagas. It's kind of crazy. Dr. Alche is absolutely right. This is not a cardiology disease. Not want this to be a cardiology disease. And again, that's why in Los Angeles we are pushing it into the primary care system. And if we can get that awareness out to the community, we'll make a huge impact. And again, the pediatric population responds the best. The younger you catch them, the younger you treat them, the better they do. So again, in terms of primary care, for us, that involves our pediatricians, and we've started that.
Thank you, Dr. Maimandi. Yes, Janka.
I had a question about outside of the United States and South America, if how children, are children screened routinely?
Thank you. The national programs in main countries in Latin America, and we talk specifically from Argentina regarding the cover rate. In our country, we have the national program, as I said, in other programs in Latin America, have systematic activity in areas under surveillance for vector transmission. And in the Argentinian case, we studied around end of the year between 30,000 to 130,000 children in communities or in program in screening before accepting the primary school, also in some provinces. That is the number per year. It depends of the activities programmed.
Thank you very much.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
I responded. Thank you. I responded just for children for your question, but additionally in Argentina, it's screened per year almost 1 million of donors and 800 women during the prenatal care.
Thank you. And let me just check in very quickly with the web. Do we have any comments coming in? Any phone calls? Okay. Yes, Janka?
It was also a question, follow-up question as to how children are dosed on the drugs. Is there a formulation for pediatrics, or how is that managed if they're treated?
Every children detected with infection in Argentina is treated systematically. The doses, yes, we have at this moment in Argentina production with two kind of pills. A pill with 100 milligram and a pill with 50 milligram, and that's is for us a great opportunity to offer a safety treatment regarding dosing. And the general doses is in children between 5 milligram to 10 milligram per kilogram per day.
Thank you. So what I'd like to do now is we're going to actually do one scenario so we can hear from our patients, panelists. So I'm going to read out a scenario to you, and we know that it doesn't contain all of the information that you would need to know, but we want to know what's the first thing that comes to your mind when you hear this. So let me read through this. Imagine that you have been invited to participate in a clinical trial to study an experimental treatment for Chagas disease. Early research in animals and people shows that this treatment may cure the disease in some people. The purpose of the study is to better understand how well this treatment works and its safety. The study will enroll 50 adults who have been diagnosed with Chagas disease but do not show symptoms. Okay, this clinical study will last 2 years, and clinical visits will occur every 2 months for the first year, and then once every 4 months in the second year. Some of these visits may involve blood tests, and more common side effects of this therapy may include nausea, vomiting, and weight loss. But rarer but more serious side effects may include changes in sensation and nerve damage and skin rash. So I know that was a lot to take in, so take a minute to maybe just go through this again.
I don't have to think about it. I've had a year and a half to think about it. I jump on it.
Okay.
Yeah, I jump on it. Well, I had written to you at one point, and I told you, I think that my purpose in life, like I told you, I said, you know, my kids are not the president. I've never done anything great. But in the last year and a half, all I can think of is maybe this was my purpose. I'm healthy right now, and I want to stay that way, but I also don't want to see someone else. I don't want someone else to end up with the problems he has. I don't want to end up with them either. I jump on it. If they could catch it ahead of time, shoot, yeah, I'm there.
Thank you, Candace. And I should say, Candace, I hope you know that what you're doing right now is pretty great. So I know I hope you know that what you're doing right now is pretty great.
Well, thank you.
You said you were saying I'm not that great, but yes, you are for being here and doing this. So let me ask you a question. The side effects that you just read about, the nausea, vomiting, and even some of the more serious side effects, the nerve damage and skin rash, do they have any impact in this decision? Do you consider them?
No, not really. I mean, who hasn't had nausea or vomiting, nerve damage and skin rash? I'll deal with it. I've seen my mother passed away recently with leukemia. I've seen her go through a whole lot more than that. Just to, live an extra 2 years. And if she could do that, I can too. I think it'd be worth it. Like I say, I also did very well on the benzodiazepine, so maybe I'm just one of those that I just fly right by.
Thank you, Candace. Myra, would you like to share your thoughts?
I totally agree with Candace. They wouldn't have to ask me twice. If it's anything to help any of us out or anyone that has not been diagnosed or just recently diagnosed, if we can help in any way, like I mentioned, my kids luckily were negative, but if my kids would have been positive, it would have never crossed my mind, because you want not only that treatment, but eventually and hopefully that cure. And if that's what we have to go through, that's what we have to go through.
Thank you, Myra. Carlos?
Como decía aquí decían antes ellas, que si podemos ayudar a alguien para que no llegue a las consecuencias que he llegado yo,
so that they don't have to arrive at the consequences that I've had. If we can avoid that.
Entonces podemos ayudarles a otros.
So if we can help others by
si
that.
podemos ayudarle a otro es bueno, porque antes cuando ya empiezan ya con vómito,
because before when I had vomit,
la tos,
I had a cough,
porque
I
eso
had
es lo
vomiting,
que agarra. Empieza uno a toser y a toser.
And you begin to cough and cough.
Toma medicamentos y
and you
no,
begin to take
y no es
medication.
posible nada.
And none of that helped.
Y por las noches no duerme uno.
And one doesn't sleep at night.
Porque se siente que si se agarra una como desesperación.
And one gets sort of desperate.
Que si se duerme no va a llegar otro día.
And one almost feels like if you go to sleep, you're not going to wake up the next day.
Es una tristeza,
so
aflicción, todo se junta.
You're so sad, and all of this is going on because of the disease.
Entonces, porque la tos es la que más molesta.
And the cough really bothers you.
Así que si podemos ayudarle a otro, ayudémosle.
So if we can help someone else, avoid that.
Evitar con tiempo para no llegar a las consecuencias.
We want to help in time so that they don't have to get to these consequences that we have.
Gracias.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carlos. Thank you very much. So I know we're approaching our break time, and we'll break in just about 5 minutes or so. So I'd like to ask also for the healthcare providers in the room, and certainly panelists, if you want to also provide your perspectives, and Maria, if she's still on the phone. Looking at this type of scenario, do you think you may have a patient that may decline therapy based on what they're reading here?
May I try to answer that?
Yes.
And I'm certain that Sheba has an answer to this too. This looks mostly to me like the conversation that we have with every patient that we offer therapy to in the United States right now. Essentially, we have to tell them that it's part of an investigational protocol. We do have the benefit of being able to say that some of the doctors in this room have proven that the medicines that we have available can cure children, recently infected patients, things like that. So it's a slightly modified version of this conversation, but right now this is what we do in order to treat a patient in the United States. Go ahead.
The current consent form that we do from is much worse than this. Any potential bad outcome is listed, and you have to go through that with the patient. So this is nothing.
And then do you have patients that decline therapy based on what they have heard?
I've had one patient decline, and I've treated, I don't know, I've lost count.
Thank you, Dr. Memadi. Yes, let's take one more comment.
Yes, I'd like to tell you that in our experience inviting patients for clinical trial, the adherence and compliance is really fantastic. The patient need to receive some hope, and of course we describe as necessary invitation for a clinical trial, but in general the adherence for clinical trial and for the regular care is really high. And in our experience, the unique situation that the patient refuses treatment is when you say you can't drink alcohol close to the party. So the patient say, can I wait? After the party, can I receive the treatment? Of course. That is the unique situation with relative frequency that the patient not refuse, asks to postpone the treatment.
I see. Okay. Yes, Maria?
I would like to personally thank Dr. Rachel Marcus and Dr. Sheila Raimandi for being here, and I want to ask them, what is your experience in your communities about referral of patients that have been diagnosed by primary care physicians? I'm asking this because I imagine you come from an area where doctors from South America are not uncommon. So I want to know if early diagnosis or screening is happening in clinics.
First. In Los Angeles, currently no one's doing screening. So most of my referrals are from the Red Cross, or they're from patients who themselves have gotten online and have found me. And the majority are those who I screen myself. As I said, we screen actively. We have outreach programs to go out into the community and do screening. So there isn't a large referral base. Because again, there isn't a great awareness of this even being an issue, and that's what we really, really need to work on, is getting the awareness out there to the people at risk and to the providers who are taking care of these people.
So
thank you.
Just to answer from the Washington, D.C. perspective, it's a little bit different in that I think because of the large Bolivian community, the Bolivians who are here are very well versed in the disease. And so there is a community in Northern Virginia that is a little bit more savvy maybe than the general medical community in the country. I, as part of my early work with Jenny and my nonprofit, did a lot of in-services at the free clinics in Northern Virginia. So I get referrals from those clinics. The NIH parasitology branch doesn't have a Chagas program, so if someone calls there and the patient doesn't have means, then they get sent to me. But you and I have tried to work on this particular problem, and you know how difficult it can be to face.
Yes, I can witness to Rachel's approach to free clinics that deal with a large number of immigrants in the area, and she's persisting, and one day we will have more success.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel and Maria. We'll take one more question, and then we're going to break for lunch. Yes, Janka.
Wanted to find out more because the importance of prevention it needs and how we can bring greater awareness. I just wonder what recommendations you have along those lines.
Yeah, I think the key is preventive medicine. You go to a primary care provider for your annual check. They check your blood pressure. They check your glucose, they check your cholesterol. If you're a Latin American immigrant, at least once in your lifetime, you should get a Chagas screen. So what we're doing in my area, and I'm hopeful that I'm trying to make it really, really simple, because if it's not simple, it's not going to happen. And in terms of having centers, there need to be referral centers, because unless we can get it where you people approve these drugs and make it easy for the rest of us to write prescriptions and not go through the consent forms and all the paperwork, primary care providers in reality will not do this. They won't. And you need to understand that. I have a coordinator that does that full-time. So you take a busy practice who has to do all the billing issues, pre-authorizations, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and you add this on top of it, forget it. It's not going to happen, and we need to be based in reality. So what we're trying to do is make this very simple. Get the screening out to the public. We have them drawing samples. They send us the samples. We currently send the samples to the CDC, but in a year when we have an electronic medical record system that gives all our patients a unified medical record number, our lab is going to be the central lab for our area, and the confirmatory testing will be done at the CDC. So, and whoever is positive, my facility will treat. So we will be the referral center, so the primary care provider won't have to deal with that, because you have to see the patients every 2 weeks.
Thank you, Dr. Mimandi.
This is Isabella Rivera again. It's just it's a couple of comments in relation to the concept of preventive treatment, because it is beyond, it's actually treating to try to avoid the development of a long-term disease progression in one way. But there is also the information in recently published studies from Dr. Sosistani and Dr. Alce also, where you actually show that you prevent the transmission from, there is indication that you prevent transmission from mother to child. So actually the treatment of women of childbearing age has an impact, has a potential impact in actually avoiding vertical transmission and perpetuation of the disease. So this, I think it's important. And I think that in going back, I think that when you look today, this is, today in the United States, it's interesting because you have, it's where the disease, it's the understanding, the magnitude of the problem is an issue. And so the need to scale up diagnosis and treatment, it's essential in some way if one thinks in terms of public health. But it's not only. But actually, if one looks broadly, it's not only a problem here, because if you look in the Americas, in Latin America, we actually, if you look at the numbers of treatment prescribed of benzonidazole and infliximab in the world, we are talking about much less than 1% of people that are thought, estimated to have the disease are actually being treated. So it's really, and so in Chagas, when you look, so you have one problem that is scaling up diagnosis and treatment, using the current available treatments, and then the next step is actually try to find better treatments also, because I think we should use what we have, but actually even try to find something better.
Thank you, Riviera. Do we have a comment on the web?
So we have one comment about someone would like to ask the Argentinian colleagues to define what cured Chagas means, since they say that the current methods being used are not confirmable, and the clinical evidence of no proliferation in the target organ is not strong. So maybe we can think about that and talk about it in the afternoon. Also, we've set out all the materials for when you go out. There's going to be a speaker list and printouts of all the slides for all the presentations, so you can pick one of those up on your way out or back.
Thank you, Graham. So yes, let's definitely come back to that point for the afternoon session, Dr. Farley. And so I'd like to just say thank you so much to all of our panelists, to Maria on the phone. Thank you for being here, and to the healthcare providers for all of your perspectives. So Let's meet again in 1 hour. We'll take a lunch break, and we'll be back for the scientific discussion.
Yeah, and you might have some opening comments, yeah, they'll obviously, they're very, I want to make sure we're getting a conversation that we steer you toward. Let's talk about drug development, get a little regulatory.
Luis.